Morning, Sharon.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Good. I'm just trying to see if I got everything set up. It looks like
No
everything's set
worry.
up.
I was a little early. Take your time.
Of course, I tried to sign in. The first thing I see is updating. Please wait. How's the weather in Scranton?
A little stormy, but last night was a little worse. Today it's just some heavy rain, but last night we had some tornado watches nearby, which is unusual for us. So, but it's just a heavy rain this morning, and then a
No.
little peak of sun. So it's okay.
Well, we
Warm
had
though.
the front. We had that front go through last night, but it lasted like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It was a little
It's a little
tiny
long.
front.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we're gonna get a repeat on the week on Thursday. I think I'm hearing we're gonna get a little bit of a again.
We got the same thing. How are you, Adrian?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good.
I work here at Epiphany in the office. So Barbara Little and I are work buddies.
Well, she's a good person.
Oh gosh, yes. Knows her stuff. Lots of it.
Adrian, Epiphany where, if I may ask?
In Glenburn.
Oh, well, we're
Between,
neighbors.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, between Clark Summit and Dalton.
So we're neighbors. I live literally down the street from Epiphany, and I worship at St. Luke's, and I worship at St. Luke's in Scranton.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yep.
Nice to
We
see
have,
you.
good to see you too. The past 2 weeks we've had Camp Create here, their 20th year, and they're using our parish hall. I guess they normally would use the Waverly Community House, but they're getting air conditioning installed and stuff up there. But the kids are having, last week they had 9, and it sounded so much louder today. And I said to the one intern, I said, you have more kids this week? She said, yeah, 17. So
Great.
but they're really using the space. So I will see. I wonder what they did yesterday. They've been going up to our pavilion to do their lunch, like their kind of reset hour and lunch. And hopefully that rain yesterday waited until they were done. Because I know I was in Fleetville and it was raining up there. But then when I came back down to Clark Summit at like 1:30, the roads were dry. So it was very strange, that middle of the day rain that we had yesterday.
Depends on where you are, I think. Or where
Yep.
Yeah.
It's still
It's
very
nice to see
muggy
you.
though.
Oh,
Woo!
yes. Yeah, for sure.
And good morning to Samantha and Julie.
Good morning.
Morning.
We'll give everybody just one more minute to come in, then we'll get started.
I'm going to be moving throughout the meeting. I'm going to stay on mute. Hopefully it won't disturb anything. If it does, I'll just hop out.
No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And then, as always, the last, about an hour from now, we'll just have general conversation, questions. As long as anybody wants to stick around, I'll stick around.
That's my main purpose for today.
All right. Well, if everybody will mute yourselves, let us go ahead. I like to be respectful of your time, so start on time. Let us begin with prayer. Blessed and loving Lord, we come before you today, each with their own concerns on their hearts, and we ask you to help lift them up to you so that they reach you and we are aware of your love for us. We ask also that you give us the enthusiasm, the empowerment, the right words to say when we do find ourselves talking to our new neighbors. Let us find them, connect with them, and eventually become friends with them. Amen. All right, let me share my screen. Shirley, are you seeing that?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm seeing you.
Okay, let's see why it didn't share. All right. Maybe because I forgot to hit share screen. That could be the reason. There we go. And now?
You got it.
Okay. From the beginning. All righty. Basically, this is our agenda for today. I think everybody's been on before, so I won't spend any time introducing myself, but to say, I hope you hear my passion. And my passion is not just for reaching out to new people, it's for helping you reach out to new people. So anytime you have any question at all, you need any kind of assistance, please, please, please call me. And encourage you to put together teams, even if it's just a couple people. It really does make a difference. And every time I say this, I point out that people with mobility limitations, whether they're totally shut in or not, can be a big help in a lot of what we're doing. So don't ignore them. Then we'll talk about goals. We'll spend a couple seconds on opposition to what we're doing, our potential for success. Then we'll look at the overall process fairly quickly. And we'll then go in, spend the bulk of our time talking about the blessing of the animals, what we might do during the event. I use the term unique in the title today because what we do requires you to uniquely use your context, your resources, particularly your staff and volunteer time, and the skills, interests, gifts that those people bring. That's how you have success. That's how you're effective, is using what you have at your place and not trying to be somebody else. And you will not do everything. I'm going to throw a whole bunch of things at you. Rather do one thing well than do 3 or 4 things and don't do them as well. And, you know, I say this because, and it's so obvious, but churches of different sizes and resources will be able to do different things. And so what I'm suggesting is don't get concerned about what another church is doing. They may have a different situation. They do have a different situation than you do. And again, the team makes all the difference in the world. Okay, goals. We're not doing this to increase attendance. We're not doing it to increase budget. Those goals are for our benefit, not to benefit other people. And they're selfish, and the people will know that. Our goal is to help people grow closer to God. And if we do that in a loving, caring, basically Christ-like manner, the fringe benefit is that some people will want to connect with your congregation, thereby increasing the number of people for the ministries. And I've learned to put that first because we don't think about it. But when we talk to somebody who's unchurched, there's a good chance that the first way they'll get connected with your church is helping with the food pantry or something like that. Increasing the number of people, increasing attendance, increasing revenue. Those are fringe benefits, but they're not the goal. We will have some opposition inside our congregations. And if this isn't true for you, then you are very blessed and probably unique. And one common attitude is, if you want to waste your time, go ahead. And the problem with this is that one person may not get in your way, but if it comes from an influential person, that can discourage other people. But more common is, we never did that before, and look at all we accomplished. And if the church is growing, then maybe that attitude makes sense, but most churches aren't. So typically what's going on is those people are reflecting back to their youth in the 1950s and early 60s, when all you needed to do was open the door and people came a-running. Or they would go away to college and they would return to church after college. Well, none of that's true. This really struck me when somebody pointed out that a 20-year-old may be, for all practical purposes, 4th generation unchurched. Their great-grandparents left church in the early 60s. Their grandparents maybe were baptized, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Their parents weren't even baptized. They've never been in church. And now you have the 20-year-old. And that's a fairly common description of what's going on today. So it's helpful to approach these discussions as a pastoral issue, because the people who are being negative are grieving a time when church was central to society. Maybe it was not better for everybody, but they think it was a good time for everybody. We need to acknowledge that and then talk about how times have changed. Their attitude is very much they should come to us, but Jesus's model was we go to them. Finally, it's also common to hear it's a total waste of time. No one is interested in church anymore. And again, hear that grief, depression, resignation, but you'll also hear it's too much trouble and costs too much. Neither of those is true. I like to define evangelism as a series of deep conversations about spirituality. And the most important thing for those conversations to occur is that the listener trusts the speaker. I believe every human being was created by God with a desire to know God better. The image I love is that we were all created with a God-sized hole in our being, a hole that only God can fill. So if we help in this process, they will want to be in relationship with us because that's how they were created. But if we don't help, there's no reason for them to stay. With 90% certainty, I can show you how to bring people in and sometimes into your door, but if they find nothing to help them grow closer to God, they will not stay long. Pre-evangelism, which is what we're talking about today, is the process of building that trusting relationship, basically creating the atmosphere. Too often what happens is we jump into evangelism by inviting people, to worship or a Bible study without considering that they don't trust us. So they're not likely to follow up on our invitation. So pre-evangelism is a step. It's not the goal. What we're talking about is a step toward evangelism. So the big question is, if every human being was created with a desire to be closer to God, why aren't our churches full? And the answer is we're not trusted. Christians and churches have a very bad reputation by many people, and I'm going to show you some stuff on that in just a minute. Also, we got to remember habits and schedules. People have something to do on Sunday morning. It may be sleeping in and having a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper. Well, for those who still read newspapers. But anyway, but that's their habit. And habits are sometimes the hardest thing to change. So the implication of that is if somebody comes one Sunday morning, you feel like they had just a really wonderful time, they were inspired and all that, and they don't come back the next week or the week after or the week after. It may not be that they had a bad time, they weren't inspired. It may be that their habits and schedules are just not permitting them to come right away. That's the reason I so strongly recommend staying in touch. It may be 6 or 8 weeks before they're ready to come back a second time. We need to stay in touch with them so when they're ready, they're still thinking about us. All right, outside our congregations, why don't people love us? And the warning I give on this, and you may have seen this before, is that discouragement, depression, and despair are likely ahead. But please don't get hung up there because there is good news, very good news. And the first thing I point out is, what does church mean to a lot of people? And I need to update this one of these days, this particular slide, but you have sex scandals, you have hatred of women or disrespect of women, hatred of gays, more disrespect for women. And then we have churches, didn't do a good job circling that, that are dominated by politics, and that's on both sides of the aisle. And, you know, people don't want to come to church to be told how to vote. This is a survey that was run by the Episcopal Church, or paid for by the Episcopal Church. It was run by a professional company. And up here at the top is the link to it if you'd like to get into it. And if you're like me, you like numbers and get into it. The question was asked is what characteristics do you associate with Christians in general? Right? In general, not your next door neighbor who you have a certain feeling about, but Christians in general. And the one on the right is for people who are not religious. This is the people that we think is probably our target audience, and to a large extent they are. But notice what they're saying about us. 55% say we're hypocritical, 54% say we're judgmental, 50% say we're self-righteous, et cetera, et cetera. Very bad image. But the one that really worries me even more is this one on the upper left. That's what Christians think of Christians. And notice what it is. 57% think we're giving. Well, that's nice, but 43% did not think we were giving. Doesn't mean they think we're not giving. It just they don't give that as a characteristic of us. They don't think that's important to Christians. Christians don't think giving is important to Christians, or compassionate, loving, respectful, friendly, honest, and down the list. In fact, you get to judgmental is the first one where a large percentage of people don't give that to us, which is a little weird, actually. But that just illustrates the attitude people have toward us. When we invite somebody to church, to St. Welcome Episcopal Church, what they hear is they're invited to St. Welcome Episcopal Church, and all these images are what come to mind. If we don't work with them, they don't get to the point where they have a positive impression when they hear the word, or at least the name of our congregation. This is a survey that just came out by the Barner Group, who are very good. They're evangelical. If you ever read any of their stuff, you have to be a little bit careful with translating the words. For example, one of the biggest examples is, for them, discipleship is inviting people to church. We use discipleship in a much broader context, obviously. But basically what you come down to is thirds. About 1/3, 29%, but about 1/3 have a low spiritual openness. They're not interested in talking about spirituality. 32% have a high spiritual openness. Now, many of those are already going to church, but some of them are still looking around. And then 39% have the moderate openness. And what that means to us is about 1/3 of the people near us are interested in talking to us. And this is again the summary of what people think about us. And I want you to notice this slide, because I'm going to come back to this particular slide later on. These are just trying to list in broad terms what the major opinions of us are, negative opinions of us are. And the reason I want you to pay attention to this is these are the attitudes we want to overcome. These are the ones we want to focus on to correct, to say our congregation is not like that. All right, this one is really sad. This is a new one. I asked my granddaughter, who's a junior in high school, what they think about, what her generation thinks about church. Yeah, a lot of these, I threw out a couple to get her going, but most of these come from her with no prompting. And, you know, she's probably accurate, but that's really depressing. That this is what teenagers think about the institution of church. And hear that word institution. We're going to come back to that. So the potential to be friends or spiritual friends is one of the ways we respond to internal opposition, is to let them know there are people who are interested in talking about it. So I have a paper on this if anybody wants a copy. But basically the conclusion is that something around 1 in 3 people who live near you are skeptical of churches, not exceptionally interested in learning more, but at some level would like to have a spiritual home and have spiritual conversations if they believe they'll be safe. In other words, if I say Mary was not a virgin, I'm not going to be attacked, criticized, or hated. And that they'll be allowed and even encouraged to share their doubts and questions. That's what we have to work on. That chart I told you to pay attention to a couple seconds ago, that's how we have to try to make our point clear. And for example, how do we show we're open to questions and doubts? The good news is a person can despise the institution while loving your congregation. So our challenge is to acknowledge the evil they have seen in other congregations while explaining that is not us, and we have good things to share. Now, if you want to look into some of the demographics, here's 2 places you can go. I actually like the Church of the Nazarene site better. I think it's easier to follow. The Episcopal Church's site is very comprehensive, but it's kind of difficult to get the information out of. I'm hoping to understand it someday, and when I do, I will put together a little video to help you understand it. Couple things on language. These are important because language shapes who we are. The words we use help to shape who we are, but even more important, shape what other people think of us. So the first one, we never have a visitor, we only have guests. If you get your head around the difference between a guest and a visitor, you've actually got probably, I don't know, 90% of what we're talking about today. We don't greet, we host. And again, looking at the difference between the two. If you just greet somebody who comes to your house versus hosting them, how different that is. We avoid or explain our Episcopal jargon. We are a church of jargon. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And most of it we don't pay any attention to because we know what it means, but the person coming in the door doesn't. And when we decide whether or not we're concerned about that, we're asking the question, do we truly want people to understand and be comfortable? Or are we taking the attitude, if they're good enough, they'll come back and learn? And I hate to say it, but that second one is the attitude lots of our members have. What do you mean you're trying to explain what the BCP is? They'll figure it out. Anyway. Previously church, that's the phrase I use for people for whom church was important at some point in their life. Maybe they went as a child, maybe they went some as an adult, but at some point for a few years anyway, church was an important part of that habit and schedule I mentioned before. Never church people have never attended on any regular basis. And there's a lot of people that kind of fit in between those two categories, but those are a fairly decent way to define our broad population. Those two groups are very different. In theory, we approach them differently. But in working with our broad community, we don't have that option. So I focus on the never church, because if we touch them, if we make things clear to them, we will have touched the previously churched. Finally, spiritual home or congregation are words I try to use rather than church. Church means the building or the institution. Remember back to that slide my granddaughter did. That was their opinions of the institution. Now, what they don't have is an opinion of individual congregations, and that's what we need to get. So how do we do it? How do we take this opportunity the Holy Spirit is providing, that something around a third of the people want to talk to us, and reach those when they already have such negative attitudes? It's a 3-stage process, and everybody's at a different stage at every moment, but we got to look at it as a process. And these are the 3 stages. We have stage 1, which I call the intrigue stage. This is the promotion stage. This is when we don't know people face to face. This is 99% impersonal. It's the newspaper article. It's a social media post. It's the poster at the recreation center. Things like that. Stage 2 is when they interact with us the first time. Now, this will be what we're talking about with the blessing of the animals. It's trying to get people we intrigued to come by and be with us for that 45 minutes. Then, after they have done that, they may trust us enough to relate with us. Now, for people who have previously been churched, they don't have to go through quite as much as the intrigue stage because they kind of know what they're getting into. So they may even come on Sunday as their first interaction. Not many, but a few. But they'll go back to asking questions about us because they left church for a reason. They left church for a reason, and that reason still is with them. So most important by far is to relate to new people we've met. And if you notice the last phase, stage 3, how they relate with us, then they may relate with us. Well, if we don't do that, we've probably wasted all our effort up to that point. And I'll say a lot more about that in that class. But my summary is I recommend texting to anyone you get contact information, texting weekly, brief, interesting, friendly messages, and I can help with all that. The absolute importance of getting their contact information. And if all you really need is their first name and phone number, there's a little more I'll recommend asking for, but if that's all you get, you got what you need. Because if we cannot contact them, we cannot influence their decision about whether to return. And I'll come back to this point in just a couple minutes. This is my fear. Our guest comes to the blessing of the animals or Sunday morning or the yard sale, and they just feel like ghosts. You know, we ignore them. They might as well be ghosts. So now we're into focusing specifically on the blessing of the animals. The question I have is how many people came to your last yard sale, your last bazaar, or some other special event, something other than Sunday? How many did you see or greet? In other words, as they're coming in, did you just say, hi, glad you're here? How many did you actually meet, get to know them at least a little bit? And how many are now actively ministering with you? That is the goal. Yes, it's nice that they bought something at the bazaar, but the goal is to have them actively ministering with you. And it is possible. It is possible to help people make the leap from yard sale buyer or BOTA attendee, blessing of the animals attendee, to active member. We can do that. That's our goal. So our goals for any activity, and this counts for Sunday, counts for the bazaar, it counts for the blessing of the animals. First of all, is have people attend, have people be glad they came, have people learn about your church, and that's the one we usually skip. Have people leave their contact information. Have people attend. And the class 3 is about promotion, so I won't say a lot about that today. But earlier, I would suggest holding the blessing of the animals earlier, probably last weekend in September. And I'll explain why a little bit. Very important. Work on making this a pet festival and not just a pet blessing, because that broadens the interest. Invite many other organizations and businesses to be part of this. Start today doing that. And I'm just listing some possibilities that other people have had. Of course, the animal shelters are kind of a given. The police canine unit is always a good one. A veterinarian, a dog walker, a dog trainer, stores that sell supplies. Some others you may not have thought about, the high school biology class with some environmentally themed display, even if not specifically pet focused. Bring teenagers. You want teenagers? Give them a reason to come. Same thing with community college or university departments. You want young adults? Invite them to come. Pony rides are always a big attraction. And for that, you would charge a fee, or the pony ride people would charge a fee. Petting zoo, same thing. Pet sitting. And we had one of the churches had a pet massage acupuncture business. I have to admit, I'd never heard of that before, but apparently it's a big thing. Kennels, pet groomer, pet clubs, maybe by breed. Feral cat societies, we had them come to one of the blessings one time, and they were a bit of a hit. People wanted to know what to do with that cat wandering through their neighborhood. A cat cafe, that would be any coffee shop that allows cats. And it's surprising how many communities have them. A zoo, even if it's not close by, may come with a display. Community science centers, the science museum, that kind of thing. So there's lots of them. So the first question is, how many should you invite? Well, think about your space. So this is one of those unique things. It depends on the space you have available. I would allow about 9 feet per display, 8-foot table plus room between. Now, if you have 4-foot tables, that obviously changes. Or you can decide to place 2 at each 8-foot table with a divider of some kind. Plan on at least 2 of these display locations to be for your church, and I'll explain that in a minute. And you probably want to have a location for refreshments, even if it's just cool water. You might invite a food truck. Very important. You are giving these people free advertising. They should pay for it, not in dollars, but in more important things. And that to be asked to announce their presence in their communications network. In other words, in their newsletter, in their email, in their posters, Facebook page, say, we're going to be at St. Welcome Episcopal Church next Saturday, come see us. And one important reason to start now is that they may have an early September newsletter, so we have to hurry to get in it. Second of all organizations and vendors should be asked to donate 1 or 2 things that we can have drawings for. And the exception is things like the police, the animal shelter, the dog or cat clubs, things like that. But all the others, the veterinarian might donate some items they sell. Actually, the supplier does the donation. Or maybe a free checkup. The store might donate bags of food, the pet sitter, walker, kennel, trainer, 2 gift certificates. Pony ride and petting zoos. One of the things when they come in, you say they have to give 2 free tickets we can have drawings for. You get the idea. And I'll talk about how to use these items and certificates in just a moment. All right. If you want this to be successful, make or break it. Involving these organizations and businesses is actually essential. If all you're going to do is have something your church alone puts on, it'll be much less effective, harder to bring people to. Once you involve them, getting their help with publicity and get items to give away. This will all directly impact the effectiveness of their event. Much more than your promotion by itself. Have something to promote. So start inviting them today or at worst tomorrow. This is one of the places where the person with mobility limitations, the right person, can be effective. I mean, because most of these things you do with a phone call. As I said, I would title it a pet festival, and then you might have underneath with a blessing of pets. Because it sounds more interesting to a broader audience and to potential groups to display at, these businesses I've mentioned about. And it explains there's going to be more there going on than just the service. Plus, a pet festival is more likely to be covered by the press. And believe me, you can get press coverage than just simply a blessing of animals. And I'll talk about the press coverage in a moment. Don't forget, this is also important. Each of those organizations or businesses are guests just as much as a neighbor down the block. Focus on them that way. If 5 such attend, you probably begin with 10 to 15 guests before the first neighbor arrives. Those police officers bringing the canines, some of those are looking for churches. The veterinarian, those others, they're looking for a spiritual community, or at least are willing to talk to you. So don't ignore them and just treat them like they don't exist. Don't ghost those guests. Now, it's important that your guests stay, and here I'm talking about the people from the neighborhood, 45 minutes plus or minus, so you have time to interact. If they just walk in, get their pet blessed, and leave, the chance of you actually making a connection are just about 0. And you'll be judged on the little things. And that's hospitality. Have free water for humans. Don't charge for a bottle of water. Have water, walking areas, and poop bags for dogs. Make sure your restrooms are clearly marked, clean, and supplied. I mean, if somebody goes in there and there's no toilet paper, that's all they're going to remember. Have chairs for the service and plus some scattered around. Here, let me explain what I'm trying to say here. If I think I'm going to have about 40 people, and that's, you're guessing. I know that. But let's say I would probably put out 30 or 35 chairs, but have a bunch of others around. because the act of hurrying to set up chairs says, hey, look how busy we are. Look how successful our event is, and gives a good impression to people around. But you want to have enough chairs. And then put chairs near places where kids might separate from parents, such as pony rides. Have a sound system. Assume you're going to have a crowd. This next one is another one people don't think about, but you don't want the blessing itself to go on forever. If you do, people are going to drift away from the crowd. So have a second or third person available to help with the blessing. Remember, this does not take clergy. Anyone can pray. So each blessing takes you 30 to 60 seconds. You know, you have one dog, you ask the dog's name, you say the prayer, you smile at the person, and you move on. 30 to 60 seconds. So you want the people to stay, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. So you want to have 2 or 3 other people. Now, I would vest them just so that it looks official. Have the entire service printed out for everyone. Have a gentle welcome and thanks for coming. This I'm talking about as they're walking in to begin with. Trained people watching for anybody standing alone. You know, the unfortunate thing about it is the first people we look to do something like this are the real extroverts, the one who's never met a stranger. But they're the ones that'll yap and really not be helpful. You need somebody who will listen, who will know how to ask good questions to begin a conversation and give the guest a chance to talk. Extroverts can do that. They just have to be reminded. And again, don't forget about your guests who are displaying. Let them know ahead of time how much space they have. If they come in expecting 8 feet and they only have 4 feet, you've created a problem. Let them know if you can provide power. Ask them if they need it. Bring them water during the BOTA. You want to be hospitable? Walk around with some bottles of water and offer them to these people, and invite them to the service. Invite them not just to sit at their booth, their table, whatever, but come on over. And have it fun. When inviting organizations or businesses, try to have something that's kid focused. And the pet zoo, the pony rides, that kind of thing. But the police canine unit demo, always a hit. And the police generally are really good about interacting with the kids. You might have, and I have this underlined, a short talk about how to train your dog. Another short talk is possible about caring for your pet. But I would probably not do more than 2 such, let me close that. 2 such presentations, just because you don't want to tie up that much time. Excuse me for a second while I plug in. I thought I had plenty of battery, but apparently I didn't. All right. You could add some kid games, a bounce house, water slide, ice cream giveaway. That shouldn't be the focus of it, but you certainly have it. I wouldn't do any contests. And we did this one time, best looking cat, anything like that, because somebody leaves disappointed. And that's the last thing we want people to leave, disappointed. But you could ask people with unusual pets if they minded kids coming to look. Maybe ask as they walk in and make it clear no is a reasonable answer, but I can't think of the name of the pet, the something dragon. The ones I know are always more than happy to show them off. Somebody brings in a chimpanzee, they're likely to want to show it off. It helps to set up good photo background. Offer to take the photo so everyone is in it. My opinion, allow photos as blessings happen, but that's up to the officiant whether or not to allow those photos. The second thing we talked about was have people learn about your church. This is the key question you need to ask. What do they know as they leave they did not know walking in? What do they know as they leave which encourages them to stay in touch and maybe return? These are questions you should ask anytime a non-member is on the property. That could be a neighborhood group. It could be the blood drive, voting. It could be your Sunday services. What does somebody walk out of the Sunday service knowing about the church they didn't know walking in? Other than whether the music is any good and the sermon's any good, what else do they know about the things you do in the community. So have people learn about your church, you intersperse this description or these information things within the other displays. And I'm going to show you some examples, but large photos, banners, they could be separate or advertise a specific display. Key, and I'm going to repeat this a couple times. You only have half a second to get their attention, and that's from 6 feet away, because they're not likely to walk up and read a typewritten sheet of paper. Graphics are essential with a couple words, food pantry, that kind of thing. Large, high enough to be seen. And as often as possible, use questions rather than statements. Questions just drag people in much more than a statement. And think about it yourself. When somebody asks a question, you're much more likely to listen and respond. Go back to that negative impressions chart I mentioned to you, and ask the people in your church, how is your church not that way? This can be a great little thing to do during coffee hour or something with Post-it notes. But don't focus on being the friendliest church in town. People know you're the friendliest church, or people know you think you're the friendliest church in town. And don't focus on your worship. They know you worship. Don't waste valuable time telling them what they already know. I think the number one thing people have questions about is can they have questions and doubts? And this is a really difficult one to show. Maybe you could have a booth or a table or whatever with the title, "Can you stump our clergy?" or "What would you like to ask our clergy?" And then have a whiteboard with a couple questions already written. Have a contact card if they want a response. You could have a secondary image of confused person with doubts and questions are good, or some phrase like that. But if you do this, make sure the people who are at the booth or the table are ready for the questions and the responses. They don't have to answer them. They just need to be polite and write them down and be thankful that people ask. Be encouraging, because you're going to have people come over very negative. That's okay. That's okay. They're testing you to see if you're safe to talk to. I think the number 2 issue is, do we seek to make the world better? Among the unchurched people, that's the second, I think, most important most of the time. What are we doing to make the church better? So you might have a table or booth with that title. What can a church do to make the world better? That gives you a chance to have a display of what you're already doing. You again might have a whiteboard to list new ideas, but on both the questions and the this one, do you seek to make the world better? Have some entries to start. Most people don't want to be the first one to write on something like that. So write down a couple ideas, and it could be things you're already doing. Don't turn down any idea. Don't say to anybody, that just won't work. Say something like, we'll consider it. They'll go into our planning process, see if it fits us. Have some canned responses ready for the crazy ideas. Don't just say no to them. Other possible topics instead of or in addition to those two, something about the kids. Can kids learn, help the world, and have fun? Are there places adults can make friends? Is science and the Bible mutually exclusive? Can we really welcome all people? Are my kids safe? Will I be told how to vote? And some of these might be done as simply displays. Some of them might be booths or tables. You don't want the thing to come across as a sales job. So depending on your space, I would think 2 or at the most 3 such displays. And again, you could have a couple photos separate from them, plus a general banner. That you'd have to have a fair amount of space to even pull that much off. But have enough so people leave knowing something about you. And a simple brochure doesn't do it. I'll talk about that in a minute. As the service ends, what the officiant needs to do, and this sounds like a lot of stuff, but it really isn't. It's probably 1 minute. Yeah, first of all, of course, you thank everybody for coming. You thank the displayers, probably as a group, since too many to list individually. Thank everybody who's come to share what they have with us, some phrase like that. Then invite everyone to the displays, games, demonstrations, announce the drawings and how to enter. And the contact card, which I'll show you in a second, is the entry form. And encourage them to complete the card and make the offer first. This is also important on Sunday morning or at any time. Most of the time, what we say to them is, please complete the contact card so we can keep in touch with you. We're asking them to do something and then telling them why. Well, a lot of people have already said no before we get to the why. Just automatic. No, I don't want to be on another list. So we would love to keep you informed about what's happening around here. There's the offer. Please complete a contact card you will find at, wherever. And we will not sell your information or spam you. That's also on the card, but it's helpful to say. And explain the drawing counts as cards. And I'm going to send you liturgical material. I sent you some for the backpacks. I will send you some for the blessing of the animals that you can use and modify in your unique way. Prayer booth. Tell them what will they know when they leave? They did not know coming. We would think they know we're about prayer, but they do if asked, but they really didn't think about it. It's never inappropriate at any event, even your Christmas bazaar. I might even say especially your Christmas bazaar, but even your yard sale. Have it in an obvious location, but out of the main pathway. You don't want it to be too overwhelming. Little tiny bit of privacy. Offer prayers then or written on the back of the contact card and follow up. If someone asks you for prayers and you have their information, you send them something the next day. Thank you for honoring us with your prayer request. And that's how I look at it. I think when somebody asks me to pray, they are honoring me by asking that. If the prayer is for something to happen later, they say Aunt Judy is having surgery next Wednesday, write them after the surgery date to pray for recovery. We build a relationship. You write them and say, I remember Aunt Judy was going to have surgery. Hope she did well. We will continue to pray for her recovery, or some phrase like that, encouraging people to respond. And if you're going to offer what they ask for during the prayers of the people, and that could just be a name, tell them which service. You just might have somebody show up to hear their prayer mentioned. All right, here's what I meant by some of the things about the displays. Here's a banner on the left-hand side, well, both sides. You can see it a little more clearly on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it's being used at a flower sale. And if you notice, remember I kept on saying you have half a second to grab their attention. Well, this is that half a second. God's work, our hands. This is a Lutheran church. That's the phrase they use a lot. So that hopefully grabs their people's attention. Then they say, oh, I wonder what they mean by that. And then up and down in the black lettering are some more information about different things they do. Notice it isn't trying to explain everything. It's just trying to intrigue them. Then at the bottom, at the top and the bottom is the "You are welcome." I like that better than "All are welcome." That's a personal opinion on it, that it's more personal to say "You are welcome." Then these are some photos they did, and they're very easy to do. Now, the font on the lettering should have been a heavier font. It worked okay, not great, but okay in real life. But notice the one on the right. It's high enough that if somebody's standing in front of it, somebody else can still see it. And that's not terribly high, but it's just a little bit higher than a lot of people put them. Remember again, the half a second from 6 feet away, high enough to be seen in the crowd. I'd say 4.5 to 5 feet. Photos are easy to do. And I know the first reaction, oh, that's going to cost us too much to print them. Well, there's probably a dozen people in your community who have a large printer. Engineers, architects, surveyors, graphic artists. Any office involved with doing plans probably has a large printer, and if approached nicely, is likely to do 2 or 3 for you without any cost. as I say, make sure to have captions. You know, the one on the left here, you know, that's fairly obvious. You're doing a food drive. But the one on the right, you know, I'm not real sure why we have a bunch of people standing around. Or the one with the music. This particular place, I've said, don't emphasize your worship. Excuse me. But this particular church has unusual mix of music, so they wanted to include that. I just, you know, you can just use PVC pipe to build a simple frame, and it doesn't cost much, doesn't take long. The intention is to intrigue people to consider your church. The intention is not to tell the whole story, and that's our danger. And that's when a brochure of some kind can be available to give more information. And you might have a separate one for each of your displays. Now, brochure does not need to be fancy. It might be a simple type page of information. It's always nice to have a couple photos on it, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy, glossy paper and all that kind of thing. I mean, it's nice when you can do that. These can be used anytime guests are in your church. If you think about it, at the blood drive, there's probably 30 non-members come in your church, 8 to 10 of which are the Red Cross. And again, they may be looking for a church. But the blood drive, the neighborhood group, voting, anytime you have people who are non-members in your church, you can use, you know, you could put up that banner, you could use some of these displays. You may not use them all at any one time. And if you do that, you could always put a brochure caddy, you know, down here on your leg of your frame, and have, again, it could just be folded up piece of paper. Have people leave their contact information without follow-up, without ongoing communication. You cannot influence their decision to return, and influence there is the key word. One day I'll learn how to draw a straight line on the screen. That all we can do is influence their decision. Obviously, we can't control it. Without follow-up, you have largely wasted your time. And just having 30 new people come into your property for the blessing of the animals, if you never touch base with them again, chances are you will never see them again. Without contact information, you cannot communicate. Very important, and this applies to everything we've talked about. We want to be assertive, never aggressive. We want to be assertive, and if you've ever taken stewardship training, that's one of the things they talk about, is you never get what you don't ask for. So we want to ask for the contact information. But if somebody, you know, isn't real happy about doing it, you back way off real quick. Say, okay, that's okay. That's okay. And, you know, again, by being negative, they may be testing. Will they be treated with respect? And will their no be respected? Have people leave their contact information. Don't ghost them. And I'll say a lot more about this in the 4th class. Now, I love what some of the evangelicals do. I think they do some things very well. One place I disagree with them is they would tell you that on Sunday or for the blessing of the animals, the people should receive a text from you on their way home. I think that's aggressive. I recommend the next day. I already mentioned responding to prayer requests. For all others, it doesn't have to be difficult. Thank you for being with us at St. Welcome Church. We hope it was meaningful for you and your pet. Blessings. That's all it takes. Doesn't have to be any more than that. And you can cut and paste that. Then start sending weekly texts. And I'll say more about this in the class, and particularly about using a texting service, which makes the whole thing 100 times easier. But the key is regular, friendly, short, interesting communications. Another place I disagree with the evangelicals, when you look at what they send out, every Saturday you get a text from them saying something about the next day's worship service. My thinking is people know you're having a worship service the next day, so focus on things they don't know about. How many people the food pantry served. Your nursery follows all safety rules. Your study group stumped the pastor. And I will, again, during the class, mention there's some really great videos available that you can just use without any effort. But you can also do some narrated slideshows about your church and send those, and I will give you more about that later. But inactive Roman Catholics, and particularly Methodists right now, are asking questions. Are the Methodists who have left their church, is the Episcopal Church the place to go? Methodists whose church has voted to leave the United Methodist Church, well, there's a group of them who don't want to do that. They're looking around, and they have a different attitude or different understanding of community than we do. So we need to explain it to them, and they distribute it in a very different way. All right, I mentioned the contact card lots of times, and I sent you these with the instructions last week, but if you didn't get it for any reason, please, please, please let me know, and I'd be more than happy to send it again. And the instructions I give explain everything on here, but you'll notice it's very simple, big wide lines, so they're easy to write on. But basically asking for name, phone number. I do ask for zip code just to kind of give you some indication of where they live. And most people are used to giving their email, so I do that. And also, if you don't get their phone number, if their phone doesn't work, which happens on occasion, you have the email to follow up. And then notice down here, you give them the option to opt out, so you won't follow up with other texts. Where to share the cards. Every church display should have some with pens, with the display staff instructed to offer them. And here I mean the church displays, not the veterinarian. But ask if they submitted it for a drawing, because the drawing is the contact card. The prayer booth is a great place, and there they may do a second one if they want to write down their prayer request. Every volunteer should have a couple cards, and the officiant should have some after mentioning them at the end of the service. Drawings. This will be your biggest source of contact cards. What I might do is announce the drawings with the display as they walked in, and the display would list the prizes. Have somebody with cards and multiple pens, standing ready to hand them out. And then have a box you drop them in. Have that person and box nearby at the end of the church. Have a posted list of prizes. Ask for the parent's name. Getting the 5-year-old's name and phone number doesn't much help. So encourage them for the parent to fill in the card. And if they have multiple children, they can fill in multiple cards. That's fine. Now, the end of any event is a bit chaotic. Everybody's trying to clean up and get out of there and go home. And at that time, it's pretty easy to lose some of the cards, and they are valuable. They're the most valuable things you have. Have the person with a box of entry for drawings responsible for checking each location. They might even go around a couple times during the event. Have prayer booth and display people note on the card where it was collected. So if somebody goes to the display about having kids, having a youth group, write that down. That tells you something about the person who handed it in. When it's time to award the prizes, don't go slow, don't dawdle, because people want to go home, but also don't hurry. Have kids draw the winning cards. Have the vendors the veterinarian hand out the one the veterinarian is handing out. If possible, use the sound system to announce. Again, you want people to understand what's going on. And after it's all over, again, thank everybody for coming. Invite them to visit displays before they go. They'll leave there pretty quick. Where and when to do it. I'm a big proponent of multi-church events, but our purpose here is to introduce your church. My preference then would be do it yourself, but do what works for you. If at all possible, do it on your church property. You're trying to introduce your church. A park can work. If on your property, this is important, do it where it's visible from the street. We want people driving by to think, wow, that church is active. Well, if you're on the parking lot behind the building, all they'll see is cars parked, and they'll assume another funeral's underway. They won't say this church is active. Personally, I like Sunday afternoon. It's just slightly less crazy than Saturday, but whenever you can. As I said before, I strongly recommend the last week in September. That avoids competing with other churches who do it the more traditional week in October. This gets you first for people to display and for media coverage. On the first week in October, the vet might get an offer from 2 or 3 different places. And if you're a week earlier, you're more likely to get them. The media, if they cover anything, they will cover one, and they will cover the first one. Good idea comes out of Holy Comforter in Charlotte, North Carolina. After you've done your primary BOTA, take it to the independent living retirement centers. Doesn't have to be any specific day. Anybody can take it. Anybody can pray. But while you're there, remember to hand out and collect contact cards. We'll talk about reaching out to them during the promotion, the Intrigue class too. And again, you're unique. We want you to do what works for you. You will not do everything. Do what works well. I gave you a lot of stuff. Knock 2/3 of it off before even thinking about it. As you work on this, you will never be alone. The only time I get annoyed is if you quit over an issue and don't ask for help. You have my email, there's my phone number, contact me anytime. And then the rest of the classes, we've done, of course, the first 2. Next week, we'll be talking about promotion, what I call the intrigue phase. The week after that, we'll talk about building relationships afterwards. And this applies to anything you do. And then on the 29th, we'll have a general session, just a quick summary and just discussion, questions, discussion. I'd love to hear some of what you're doing. And most important thing to do is pray. And we're praying for us. We're praying that we do what God wants us to do. We're not praying that those people come to our church. What we're doing is pray that we are the right people to encourage them to come. All right, if people would unmute yourself, we'll have some time for questions and any kind of discussion. Hey, Beth, I didn't get to say hello to you before.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I had a parishioner with an issue, but I was glad to be able to join in.
Good. So questions, comments, discussion. Oh, let me check the chat room first. Bearded Dragon. Yes, that's it. Thank you to whoever, Adrian. I couldn't think of the name. Other things.
Father Ken, I think what we're kind of aiming for this year is to do the back to school blessing Sunday, just merged in with what we're already doing on that Sunday, not having it as a separate event, and then focusing on doing a separate event for the blessing of the animals.
Okay.
Do you think that's last year we had we had people donate school supplies. We had a blessing for all the kids, we had a blessing for all the teachers, and a gift for all the teachers and all the kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I think you're good. Try not to do both of them full steam. That's that, once you've done them for a year or two, then you might be able to do both of them once it kind of becomes routine. But first time off, no. Now for the blessing of the school supplies and stuff, the one thing I would encourage you to do on that, yes, tell the community you're doing it, but you're unlikely to get anybody just in off the street. But you're telling them, you're announcing that this is something you're interested in. So you're building a good impression. But the one thing I would do is if you have, and I'm sure you do, have a teacher or an ex-teacher, ask them to reach out to teachers, particularly if, I don't know, Sanford, whether or not they have school districts that cover your church or whatever, but reach out to the teachers, also the principals, and the other staff at the school. Those are groups that might show up just for this event, particularly if you're going to bless them. So that group, I wouldn't worry too much about the broad community, but I would reach out to the teachers. And again, one or two teachers, if they're willing to do it, could do that, and it wouldn't take a whole lot of effort.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Any questions from Pennsylvania?
Think so. It's very interesting to me. So we've been doing the blessing of the animals for many years at St. Luke's. And what it becomes is St. Luke's is really nothing more than the venue for that. So we have two types of guests that come. We have parishioners who bring their particular pets, and we have the community that comes. But for the community, it's really an attitude of one and done. Get in, get the blessing, and get back. So, some of the ideas that you talked about having posters or boards up and pictures about who we are and identifying for people more about who we are at St. Luke's than they came in the door knowing. So that's something that I'm going to really try to focus on, is our blessing of the animals. Ours we do consistently at the Feast of St. Francis. So that's always when we do ours, and people do look forward to it. We see the same people year after year come back with their same pups, but we don't draw them into anything else that's happening in the parish. So I got some really great ideas today, Father Ken. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Well, and that's one of the reasons, the one and done, the quickie, come in, leave. That's one of the reasons I think having other people from the community, like a veterinarian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It gives them a reason to stay.
Yep.
And one thing I forgot to say, and Shirley, remind me to put this on a slide for tonight. Ask your members not to fill out the contact card and enter for any drawings.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want your guests to leave happy.
Right.
Not your senior warden.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can.
That's actually a little foreign. That's a little foreign to our parish. We don't do any drawings. We don't do any. I don't know how others parishes, but we don't do any of that. And I'm not so sure that we would. But anyway.
That's why I use the word unique.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Again,
we haven't.
The primary
we haven't. Doesn't mean we would.
The primary reason for the drawings, well, it adds fun. It gives you something to announce. In fact, I'll show you when we get, I think it's next week. One of the things I recommend is have a standard Facebook post, standard background, and then every couple days, Dr. Smith, veterinarian, will be there. Dr. Smith, veterinarian, is going to give out 2 free checkups, just kind of build excitement. But the primary reason for the drawing is that's where you get your contact information, or the easiest way to get it. But you're unique. You do what works in your context.
Or not be afraid to try something new.
Yep. Julie, anything from North Carolina?
Trying to unmute myself. a lot of good ideas. Yeah, excited. It's too late for us to do anything big with blessing of the backpacks. Yeah. But I'm excited about doing something. We have a vestry meeting tonight, so I'm going to bring up, we've been kind of talking about blessing of the animals, kind of on and off over the past couple of weeks, and it's hard to believe that it's actually here already. I like the idea of having it the last Sunday of September. When I looked at, because we can't really, as you know, our church is tucked back in the end of a alleyway, and we're totally not visible from the street. So the best option for us would be, a park where we've had our activities before. And we haven't had a blessing of the animals since probably 5 years, 5 or 6 years. So I'm excited. A
Good.
lot of good ideas. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, well, and you're close enough that if I'd be happy to come down again if at any time that's useful, and help with your planning team or whatever.
I will probably be taking you up on that. Thank you.
Okay. I got grandchildren in Cary, so I always have an excuse
Oh,
to go.
good. Okay.
Well, I don't want to keep you longer than you need to be here, but if there are any other questions, like I say, I'll stick around as long as anybody wants to talk.
I'll just ask one question about the contact form, Ken. So I see what your last little bullet in the instruction section, create your own QR form. That doesn't take you right to the front page of your website. So now we do have one, which Barbara Little has created, and it goes, I believe it goes right to our website. I don't think so. She also has a contact form that we have here. So you're talking about creating a unique QR code that would go to an online version of this contact form? Is that what you're
Exactly.
talking about there? Okay.
And
I
the reason
wonder, because we have my internet was kicking in and out, which is why I closed all the other windows. So I apologize for me kicking off twice there, but we have on our website, we've got a brief contact form, but I'm not sure if it's a unique. I'm going to try to pull it up while I'm still online with you all. I don't know if it's on its own, is just an embedded contact, email, versus being an actual separate HTML page. So are you talking about having this QR code would go to a unique, whether it's a unique page on your website or a unique form on your website? That's what you're referring to, rather than just to the web page where people then have to navigate. And
that's easy enough. The QR code is, if you got one, they're easy enough to do. There's lots of places online that'll do it for free. You just enter in, just copy and paste in the actual address and it's made.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The rationale is if you send somebody to the front page, then they got to look for a way to get to the information. You're going to lose them.
Sure. Oh, of course. Yeah. Even our junior warden hates scrolling. He's like, oh my God, they should just be able to. I don't know. I guess I'm used to it. It's something that I have a smaller computer screen. It's a single screen. I don't have a secondary screen. So I'm just used to scrolling no matter whose website I'm on, let alone our own. So I'm going to have to see, because I'm looking and trying to find we have a pop-up on our web page that's for our newsletter, but I'm not finding just a straight when we have a prayer request. We have a couple of things: name tag, prayer request form, but I'll have to get with Barbara and see about how we can do a QR direct to a contact form. Because right now I do see she's got a separate QR for our Sunday school registration, and a QR code to go to our name tags. We just got a new priest at the beginning of July, and we're trying to encourage everybody to wear their name tags and request name tags if they no longer have one or never had one. And but the whole contact portion, and I don't even think, not even finding it on. I know she puts a contact button in our e-weekly newsletter, but I'm not seeing where she's got it. Let's see. There's a get acquainted. I'm not seeing where she's got like a direct form here, but so that's good. That's something I can talk to her and our new priest about to try
Yeah.
to get.
We actually did one on our website. We use WordPress for the site, and you can add an extra page that just says contact us. And then I linked it to a Gmail form so that it goes straight to my Gmail when somebody fills it out. And that I found to be super easy for me, because then I get a notification that I've got that information, and you can print it out, you can put it in an Excel file, all that kind of good stuff. So
Yeah. Well, and we do have there are people who reach out to us through our webpage, but it must be something more than just, a generic. I've had longer messages, and they come to our church email, as well as to my associates, who's our social media director. So we both get it in case one of us isn't here, or somebody can handle it before the other person does. But I think it's on specific pages. Like I'm not even finding like a direct one right on our main. So that's something I'll talk to her about, doing like a QR for more than just the, you trying to capture, like you said, that simple information of their first name and a cell number, and can we text you once a week with an event, type of thing.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the keys, is keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you'll notice I had there the option of just texting the person's name to a number.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a free Google phone number, and it'll go to that, so that you're not tying up anybody's personal. And most churches are still on landlines, so they can't text to the landline. But you can get a free Google number. It's very easy to set up. And what it is, when you set it up so your email gets an announcement that you've gotten a text.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even have to be checking it. I can't remember if it actually copies the text. I don't remember. But anyway, you don't have to be checking that number periodically. Mm-hmm. And that's just,
you can actually get an email of the voicemail too. It'll do a transcription if you get a voicemail, and it'll send you an email of that too.
Okay, good. Thank you. And that's the kind of thing a lot of young adults are used to doing, rather than filling out a form. Now, again, during the blessing of the animals, they have to fill out the form, do the drawing. That's more for Sunday morning. Or if you hand out contact cards during the neighborhood group's annual meeting or something, they might do that. But that's more for Sunday morning, when you have a young adult. And I'll talk about this some later, but one of the things I recommend is, if the clergy will do it, and I've got a little video sample, that during the time between the peace and the actual starting of the offertory, there's kind of some confusing time there while everybody's still walking around and greeting everybody. That's a great time for the priest to ask people to fill out the contact form, because they then have the offertory to do it, and they can put it in the basket if they get it done in time. And I recommend to the clergy that they do it every week, whether or not there's somebody new there or not, for a couple reasons. One is, people may not fill it out till they've been there the third time. They may not feel comfortable the first couple times. So, but also, if I don't do it every week, I'm likely to forget it the week I really need to do it. I need to make it. Plus, the other thing it does is it announces to the congregation that we're expecting new people. It just kind of shouts at them, we're expecting new people.
That's all great, Ken. I need to run, but thank you. I really appreciate all the input.
Okay, you're welcome. You know to call me anytime.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. That's good stuff. I'm sure Barbara's been on possibly other times and stuff, and other webinars with you. So good. I have some stuff to share with our priests. So that's excellent.
Okay, great. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.